50% tariff on Brazil and what that means for the cost of coffee.
Now, Brazil is the world's largest coffee exporter. So Marcelino Benito explains how that tax could hit American wallets.
What does this mean for 67% of U.S. adults who depend on that caffeine fix?
We begin tonight with breaking news that has sent shockwaves through American households. Imagine waking up and realizing that your daily cup of coffee, the one thing nearly 67% of U.S. adults rely on just to start their day, has suddenly become collateral damage in a global trade war. Sounds impossible, right? Well, that's exactly what happened when President Trump announced a stunning 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee imports. This wasn't just another political maneuver. Overnight, America's #1 beverage, yes, even more popular than water, was thrust into chaos. The U.S. imports over 22 million bags of coffee each year, and Brazil, as the world's largest coffee exporter, is the single biggest supplier to American consumers. With this tariff, nearly 50 shiploads of Brazilian beans were reportedly turned away at U.S. ports in a single night. Panic in the coffee industry, rising costs for consumers, and new billion-dollar opportunities for America's rivals abroad. Before we go deeper into the story, make sure you hit that like button. It helps us push this critical coverage out to more people. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to US Finance Wire, so you never miss an update on how global finance, trade, and politics affect your daily life. America's love affair with coffee. Let's be clear, coffee in America isn't just another beverage. It's a lifeline. From that bleary-eyed first sip at dawn to the midday pick-me-up at work, coffee fuels routines across the nation. According to USDA data, Americans consume more than 24.5 million bags of coffee every year. That's about 10.8 pounds per person. Put another way, it's a market worth nearly $4 billion annually. Coffee is so deeply ingrained in our culture that it shows up everywhere. Gas stations, office break rooms, diners, kitchens, and yes, every street corner cafe. For millions of Americans, coffee isn't a luxury. It's a necessity, and that's exactly what makes this tariff decision so controversial. Why the US can't grow enough coffee. Here's the cold reality. America simply can't grow enough coffee on its own. Coffee plants need tropical climates, high altitudes, and consistent rainfall. You won't find that in Texas, California, or New York. Only Hawaii and Puerto Rico have conditions suitable for large-scale coffee cultivation, and even then, their combined output is minuscule compared to national demand. Some experimental farms exist in Southern California, but their beans are marketed as niche, luxury products, not the stuff that fills supermarket shelves. The US has no choice but to rely on imports. And when it comes to imports, no country matters more than Brazil. Roughly 30% of all US coffee imports come from Brazil. That's nearly 1 out of every 3 cups of coffee Americans drink. Colombia, the next largest supplier, provides less than 1/5 of that. In short, Brazil isn't just one of many suppliers. It's the supplier. The backbone of American coffee. Brazil's dominance didn't happen overnight. With vast coffee-growing regions, ideal climate, and more than a century of expertise, Brazil has perfected the art of coffee production. But what really cements its role in the US market is affordability and consistency. Brazilian Arabica beans, known for their smooth, mild flavor, form the backbone of America's coffee culture. They aren't flashy or exotic, but they're reliable, exactly what major roasters like Starbucks, Dunkin', Tim Hortons, Maxwell House, and even Costco's Kirkland Signature need for their blends. If you've enjoyed a smooth drip coffee at your local diner or grabbed a cup on your morning commute, chances are Brazilian beans were behind it. They've quietly been the glue holding America's coffee culture together. But that dependence also left the US vulnerable. The tariff shock of August 1st, 2025. On August 1st, 2025, Washington dropped a bombshell, a sweeping 50% tariff on all coffee imports from Brazil. Overnight, the smooth flow of beans that had fueled American mornings for decades was disrupted. The White House pitched it as a way to level the playing field for U.S. coffee producers. But here's the truth. America doesn't have enough producers to compete. The move effectively weaponized coffee in an escalating trade war. The fallout was immediate. Brazilian shipments stopped. American importers scrambled to rewrite contracts. Within a week, coffee imports from Brazil fell by nearly 18% compared to the year before. Suddenly, roasters were turning to Central America, Africa, and Asia for beans. But those alternatives came at a higher price and in limited supply. And Brazil? It didn't blink. Brazil's defiance and new alliances. Instead of caving, Brazil doubled down. The country's president publicly vowed not to be humiliated by Washington's pressure. Within days, Brazil had already pivoted to new markets. China moved first, fast-tracking import licenses for over 200 Brazilian coffee companies. Remember, China's coffee market is exploding, with cafe culture taking root in cities like Shanghai and Beijing. For Brazil, this was a golden opportunity. Europe wasn't far behind. German retail giant Ruve signed a deal with a Brazilian cooperative previously tied to U.S. roasters. South Korea and Japan also rushed to secure supplies. In just weeks, Brazil had turned what looked like a devastating blow into a strategic win, diversifying its customer base and locking in billions of dollars in new trade deals. Meanwhile, America was left scrambling. The cost for American consumers. For U.S. households, the impact came quickly. Just a few months earlier, a 1-pound bag of ground coffee cost about $7 on average. By late summer, that same bag was selling for more than $8 nationwide, and in places like California and New York, even topping $9. That's a 15 to 20% increase practically overnight. For families who brew several pounds a month, that means an extra $50 to $100 a year just to keep their caffeine fix. It may not sound catastrophic on paper, but for households already stretched by higher food and fuel costs, it was another heavy burden. Coffee had always been one of the few affordable indulgences Americans could count on, regardless of the economy. Now it was edging closer to luxury status. People began to adapt. More brewed at home instead of visiting coffee shops. Lattes became weekend treats rather than daily rituals. Some switched to cheaper brands, others cut back altogether. What used to be a simple morning habit was suddenly a budgeting decision. Winners and losers in the coffee business. Not every business was hit equally. Big players like Starbucks and Dunkin' had global supply chains and long-term contracts that softened the blow. Sure, Starbucks faced hundreds of millions in potential losses, but the company's scale and loyal customer base helped it absorb the hit. Small independent cafes and family-owned grocery stores weren't so lucky. With razor-thin margins, they felt the full brunt of bean price spikes, sometimes as high as 30 to 40%. Many tried substituting cheaper beans from Asia or Africa, but customers noticed the difference immediately. The taste wasn't the same, and loyalty began to erode. Stories poured in from Ohio, Kansas, Oregon, and Florida of local cafes cutting hours, laying off staff, or even closing their doors. When small cafes vanish, it's not just a business loss, it's a blow to communities. These shops are neighborhood hubs. Their disappearance leaves empty storefronts and a gap in the local social fabric. Canada's calm advantage. While Washington waged its coffee war, Canada quietly stayed out of the fray. No tariffs, no drama. As a result, Canadian coffee imports from Brazil actually rose by 7% in 2024 and surged again in 2025 when U.S. demand collapsed. Ottawa positioned itself as a stable, reliable partner for Brazil at the exact moment America was burning bridges. The payoff was immediate. Canadian chains like Tim Hortons saw no need to raise prices, keeping their coffee affordable while American prices climbed. Canadian roasters even began selling directly to U.S. consumers online, creating an ironic situation where Americans were buying Brazilian coffee through Canadian retailers. By doing nothing, Canada gained everything. It secured long-term supply deals and even hinted at surpassing the US as one of Brazil's top buyers. Number global coffee markets in turmoil. On the commodities exchanges, chaos reigned. Arabica futures on the New York Exchange shot up by more than 30%, while Robusta futures in London surged over 50%. By late summer, Arabica beans were trading at $3.70 per pound, up from $2.80 just a month earlier. Robusta jumped to nearly $2 per pound. For farmers in Vietnam, Colombia, and Ethiopia, this price surge meant short-term profits. But it also raised serious concerns. If the US was willing to target Brazil, what stopped it from imposing tariffs on other major suppliers? Together, Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, and Ethiopia produce nearly 70% of the world's coffee. If even two of them faced US tariffs, the global coffee trade could plunge into chaos. Number sign what it means for you. So where does that leave the American consumer? The short answer: paying more for the same cup of coffee and possibly facing long-term shortages if trade wars continue. The comforting idea that coffee is always cheap and always available is no longer guaranteed. Don't forget to like this video if you learned something new, and hit subscribe to US Finance Wire for more deep dives into the stories shaping your wallet, your lifestyle, and the world around you. Because as this coffee crisis shows, sometimes the battles fought in Washington end up hitting you right where it hurts, in your morning cup of joe.